The Industrial Revolution brought a new type of economy and a new type of society. It brought a different method for organising production, changed requirements on workers. There was a new approach to consuming and a labour supply within households. The balance of power changed between the property classes, industrial capitalists, and the working classes. What this change in economy and society meant has been a much debated topic at the time and through to the present. One place where this debate played out was in the writings in the late 1820s and early 1830s of the poet laureate Robert Southey and Thomas Macaulay, a rising Liberal politician and future famous historian. Southey, in his colloquies on progress and prospects in society, argued that the new manufacturing economy was causing a degree of inequality that was unacceptable and that the government should intervene to correct that inequality. Here's a section from Southey's colloquies. People may be too rich because it is the tendency of the commercial and more especially of the manufacturing system to collect wealth rather than diffuse it. Great capitalists become like pikes in a fish pond who devour the weaker fish, and it is but too certain that the poverty of one part of the people seems to increase in the same ratio as the riches of another. Macaulay launched a counter-argument against Southey in the pages of the Edinburgh Review. In a famously caustic review of Southey's colloquies, Macaulay began his review by saying, "We have for some time past observed with great regret the strange infatuation which leads the poet laureate to abandon those departments of literature in which he might excel, and to lecture the public on sciences which he still has the very alphabet to learn. Mr. Southey brings to the task two faculties which were never, we believe, vouchsafed in measure so copious to any human being, the faculty of believing without reason and the faculty of hating without provocation." The substance of Macaulay's argument was that he believed Southey was ignoring the huge benefits for human progress that the market-based capitalist industrialist economy was bringing. And so here I've included another quote from Macaulay's response that makes that point. "If any person had told the Parliament which met in perplexity and terror after the economic crash in 1720, that in 1830 the wealth of England would surpass all their wildest dreams, that the annual revenue would equal the principal of that debt which they considered as an intolerable burden, that for one man of £10,000 living there would be 5 men of £50,000, that London would be twice as large and populous, that nevertheless the rate of mortality would be half of what it was, that stagecoaches would run from London to New York in 24 hours, that men would be in the habit of sailing without wind and would be beginning to ride without horses, our ancestors would have given as much credit to the prediction as they gave to Gulliver's Travels. Yet the prediction would have been true." So Macaulay is emphasising the great benefits that he sees for human well-being from the new economy. Of course, the most famous critic of the new economy, market-based capitalist economy, was Karl Marx. Marx was born in Germany but lived the last 33 years of his life from 1850 to 1833 in London, where he was thinking and writing about the capitalist economy. His most famous work was Capital, which, in the words of Stephen Pressman, had the objective to understand how capitalist economies work and where capitalist fits into the economic history of mankind. Marx believed that capitalism was just one phase in the evolution of economic systems and that inevitably it would decline and cease to exist because of inherent problems that it contained. Marx thought that the inherent problems with the capitalist system were its exploitation of and creation of alienation amongst workers, the working class. He thought that exploitation occurred because in the capitalist system workers could be paid less than the value of what they produced, and he thought alienation occurred because workers were separated from, given no control over what they produced or how they produced. So Marx thought for those reasons that it was inevitable that there would be a class struggle in the capitalist system between the capitalists and the working class. And he thought that that class struggle would worsen over time due to a dynamic in the capitalist economy, which was that the working class would continue to be made worse and worse off over time. For example, Marx pointed to competition between industrial capitalists for business. He said that that competition would lead, the competition which would drive them to try and lower costs, for example, would lead them to increasingly replace workers with machines. That would create what Marx called the reserve army of unemployed, creating substantial unrest amongst the working class. And so Marx thought eventually that unrest would reach such a level where the capitalist system would end up being overthrown. As he said, the integument, the shell or skin, is burst asunder. The knell of capitalist property sounds, the expropriators are expropriated. I think the debate between Southey and Macaulay presages a debate about capitalist economies that's really been continuing on from that time to the present. That debate identifies, first of all, the scope for a capitalist market-based economy to be an engine for human progress, but it also identifies the substantial inequalities that can potentially exist in a market-based capitalist economy. Marx saw both those sides of the capitalist system, and it was his view that it was the latter force, the inequality, that would end up being decisive in determining the fate of the capitalist system. In that, he was wrong. Partly, Marx's reasoning was flawed. His view of the way the capitalist economy worked was incorrect. Partly as well, Marx underestimated the capacity or the scope to improve the capitalist system. For having adopted this new method of organising activity, there was an agenda in society then to seek to improve the capitalist market-based method of organising activity. As Sylvia Nasser says in her book on economic thought, Grand Pursuit, before 1870, economics was mostly about what you couldn't do. After 1870, it was mostly about what you could do. The desire to put mankind into the saddle is the mainspring of most economic study, wrote Alfred Marshall, the father of modern economics. That is, one of the big objectives of this new discipline of economics was to look at the capitalist system and to see in what ways it could be improved, how you could overcome some of the problems that people like Southey and Marx were identifying with it. However, just as Marx wasn't convincing, so this attempt to improve the capitalist economy has never been entirely convincing either. And so as we chart the history of economic development from this period of the Industrial Revolution through to the present, we'll see that this debate is a recurring theme, the questioning of the capitalist system and the attempts to civilise capitalism. In the next section of the lecture, I'll talk about how the Industrial Revolution spread to other parts of Europe.